Beginning with the period column of the timeline on page 2106 of the Jewish Study Bible, the book David and Solomon will make reference to some of these archaeological periods, mainly the Middle Bronze Age, the Late Bronze Age, and the Iron Ages 1 and 2. There will be little discussion of the distinction between Iron 2A and 2B, so we can ignore that. The Middle Bronze Age, circa 2000 to 1550 BCE, essentially corresponds to the rise of the Old Babylonian kingdom, whose most famous king was the great lawgiver Hammurabi. This is to be distinguished from the so-called Neo-Babylonian kingdom, whose most famous king was Nebuchadnezzar, responsible for the destruction of the First Temple. The Late Bronze Age, circa 1550 to 1200 BCE, sees the rise of the Hittite Empire in Asia Minor. We'll be talking about geography below, vying for control of Western Asia against a resurgent Egypt. The Hittite Empire is brought to an end as a result of a massive invasion of people known as the Sea Peoples around the year 1200 BCE. One group of these Sea Peoples is identified as the Philistines. We'll discuss this event in a future session, but for now it is important to note that this invasion nearly brought down the Egyptian New Kingdom and roughly corresponds to the first settlement of Israelite tribes in the land of Israel, as well as the early settlement of the Philistines along the southern coast of Palestine in an area roughly corresponding to today's Gaza Strip. Thus, the beginning of the Iron Age, circa 1200 to 550 BCE, corresponds to these historical events, and it is interesting to note that the Bible mentions what appears to be a Philistine monopoly on iron production in 1 Samuel 13, 19 to 21. So much for the archaeological periods. I would like to turn now to biblical history and to suggest 7 major stages: early settlement, united monarchy, divided monarchy, Babylonian exile, restoration or Persian period, Hellenistic period, and Roman period. This may be slightly more detailed than the periodization offered in the reading in the Jewish Study Bible, but I think you'll find it useful. You'll note that in this analysis, I will begin with the period of Israel's early settlement of the land. From a strictly historical perspective, we truly have no hard evidence for the ancestors, Moses, the Exodus, the wilderness wanderings, etc. This is not to say that these events did not occur. It is to say that there is no historical or archaeological record of these events outside the Bible that would allow us to establish a chronology. Scholars have attempted for many years to associate certain broad sociological and cultural patterns depicted in the Torah literature to similar patterns discovered in the historical and archaeological record of the ancient world, and we'll be discussing some of this material in session 3. For our purposes, however, we begin with the first solid historical evidence in the historical record outside the Bible for the existence of a group called Israel. In 1896, a British archaeologist, Flinders Petrie, discovered in the ancient Egyptian capital of Thebes a black granite pillar known as a stela, with an inscription, a kind of victory hymn composed on behalf of Pharaoh Merneptah, celebrating his successful military campaign in Palestine. Dated to the year 1205 BCE, the stela mentions a group called Israel, using a designation that indicates a loosely organized tribal society. This reference has encouraged scholars to date the settlement of the Israelite tribes in the land of Israel to around this time. This early settlement period which would roughly correspond to the period of Judges in the Bible, lasts until the advent of the United Monarchy, circa 1025 BCE. The United Monarchy lasted throughout the reigns of Saul, David, and Solomon, until the beginning of the reign of Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, in 728 BCE. At this time, according to the Bible, the tribes of the north seceded from the United Monarchy. From this time, there were two Hebrew kingdoms in Palestine: a northern kingdom known as the Kingdom of Israel, ruled by a series of royal dynasties, and a southern kingdom known as the Kingdom of Judah, ruled by descendants of King David. We refer to this period as the Divided Monarchy. The Divided Monarchy was disrupted in 722 BCE when the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern Kingdom of Israel, exiled many of its inhabitants, and repopulated the area with exiled people from other parts of the empire. These exiled Israelites are what we often call the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel. In the year 586 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylonia conquered the Kingdom of Judah, destroyed Jerusalem and the First Temple, and exiled the leading citizens of the kingdom to Babylonia. This is the period of the Babylonian exile. The exile lasted 50 years until in 536 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus, who had conquered Babylonia, issued a decree encouraging exiles to return to and rebuild their native lands. A certain number of the exiles from the Kingdom of Judah, though not all, returned to the territory of the former Kingdom of Judah, which became the Persian province of Judea, hence the Restoration or Persian period. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, marking the beginning of Greek rule in Palestine and the so-called Hellenistic period. Finally, in 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey conquered Jerusalem, thus initiating the Roman period. Clearly, we will be going into more detail of biblical history, both in the reading from the Jewish Study Bible for next session and in the reading from David and Solomon generally. However, David and Solomon frequently refers to events involving Assyrian, Babylonian, Egyptian, and Persian rulers, and it is worthwhile to orient ourselves to some of these events and rulers before we begin. A good way to start is to orient ourselves geographically. Again, more detail will be provided in the reading for Session 2 from the Jewish Study Bible, but I'd like us to have a general sketch of things. It'll be helpful for you at this point to be looking at Map 6 at the back of the Jewish Study Bible. We are looking primarily at what is today the Middle East. For some reason obscured in the recesses of academia, students of ancient history refer to this territory as the Near East. Sometimes we simply refer to it as Western Asia, though of course we also include Egypt, which is in Africa. This is territory covered today by the countries of Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, and what the U.S. State Department officially designates as Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. In terms of ancient history, we will be highlighting 5 regions: Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, Syria-Palestine, Egypt, and Persia. From the perspective of ancient history, the area that basically corresponds to modern Iraq, grids H3 to J4 on Map 6, is referred to as Mesopotamia, literally between the rivers. That is, the Tigris River in the east and the Euphrates River in the west. During the time period covered by our class, The southern part of this territory constituted the kingdom of Babylonia, with the kingdom of Assyria to the north. The territory occupied today by Turkey, grids E2 to F3 on map 6, is often referred to as Asia Minor, or Anatolia. This is the locus of the great Hittite Empire during much of the Late Bronze Age. Of course, the geographic region that we will be studying is Syria-Palestine, grids F4 and G4 on map 6. Before proceeding, I want to say something about the term Palestine. It is obviously a controversial term, given the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. I want to say first that my use of this term has absolutely no political connotations. The term has been used as a generic geographical designation, including by Jews, for millennia. Before the founding of the State of Israel, the newspaper The Jerusalem Post was called the Palestine Post, the newspaper of the pre-state Jewish Yishuv. In 1845, Rabbi J. Schwartz of Jerusalem published a book titled History and Geography of Palestine, and you have a web address there that you can go to see a facsimile of that book. The term Palestine is a generic geographic designation, and it's no different than a geographic designation like the Delaware Valley or the Horn of Africa. Indeed, since the territory of ancient Israel at times included land beyond the Jordan, and what is today the Kingdom of Jordan, the term Palestine is simply a convenient geographic label for the lands of the Bible. The Syria part of Syria-Palestine continues to be the territory of the modern nation of Syria, and was an important locus of one of the Aramean kingdoms in ancient times, with a capital in Damascus, grid G4 on map 6. Of course, Egypt is Egypt, grids F5 to 6 on map 6, and Persia is the modern Iran, grids J3 to L5 on map 6. Before entering into a slightly more detailed description of the geography of Syria-Palestine, let's go back to fill in a bit of world history that will become an important part of our story. We'll begin with the interaction between the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, with the Mesopotamian kingdoms of Assyria and Babylonia. We will be highlighting 9 kings: Shalmaneser III, Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser V, Sargon II, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, Ashurbanipal, Nebuchadnezzar, and Cyrus II. I trust that this sketch will be useful as you follow these events in the reading from David and Solomon. As noted in the discussion of the major stages of biblical history, the kingdom of Assyria, which beginning in the 9th century BCE grew into a major empire known historically as the Neo-Assyrian Empire, had a profound impact on the history of ancient Israel. The Assyrian king Shalmaneser III, 858 to 824 BCE, began an effort to expand Assyrian control into Syria-Palestine, most likely as a way to gain access to the lucrative Mediterranean maritime trade. In 853 BCE, Shalmaneser faced stiff resistance from a coalition of Syrian-Palestinian kings in a battle fought in the vicinity of Karkar, a city along the Orontes River in Syria, grid G4 top center on map 6. Shalmaneser's depiction of this battle in his own royal inscription notes a large force of cavalry and chariotry led by the Israelite king Ahab, who apparently joined the coalition. Ironically, the Israelite king who overthrew Ahab's dynasty, Jehu, is pictured submitting prostrate before King Shalmaneser on a monument known as the Black Obelisk, carved in 825 BCE. In 735 BCE, the Judean king Ahaz, faced with a threat from King Pekach of Israel and King Rezin of Damascus, called upon the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III, 745 to 727 BCE, to rescue him. Ahaz became a tribute-paying vassal of the Assyrian king. In 732 BCE, Tiglath-Pileser conquered Damascus and annexed the territory of this Aramean kingdom as an Assyrian province. 10 years later, in 722 BCE, the kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, an operation undertaken at first by the Assyrian king Shalmaneser V, 727 to 722 BCE, with mopping up operations conducted by his successor, Sargon II, 722 to 705 BCE. The kingdom of Israel ceased to exist, its population scattered in exile to Assyria. In 701 BCE, the Assyrian king Sennacherib, 705 to 681 BCE, invaded the kingdom of Judah, ruled by King Hezekiah. While the invasion was quite destructive, Sennacherib retreated without conquering Jerusalem, though Hezekiah was forced to pay heavy tribute. Judah remained a vassal kingdom under the next Assyrian king, Esarhaddon, 681 to 669 BCE. However, the empire began to crumble under Esarhaddon's successor, Ashurbanipal, 669 to 627 BCE, and in 609 BCE, the empire was totally vanquished by a combination of Babylonians and Medes from Persia. The former Neo-Assyrian Empire was quickly replaced by the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Finally, in 586 BCE, the kingdom of Judah was conquered by the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II, sometimes referred to as Nebuchadrezzar, 605 to 652 BCE. The first temple was destroyed, and the leading citizens of Judah were exiled to Babylonia. As noted 50 years later, in 536 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus II, 539 to 530 BCE, having conquered Babylonia in 539 BCE, allowed the exiled Judeans to return to the newly constituted Persian province of Judea. I would like now to offer a brief word about Egypt and will highlight 4 pharaohs: Merneptah, Sheshonq, Psammetichus, and Necho. We have mentioned the victory stela of Merneptah, 1213 to 1203 BCE, who invaded Palestine circa 1205 BCE and left us a list of the names of conquered peoples, including Israel. The Bible records another Egyptian invasion under Pharaoh Sheshonq, 745 to 724 BCE, known in the Bible as Shishak, that took place under King Solomon circa 925 BCE. Sheshonq also left us a description of his campaign with the names of conquered territories, which will be a topic for future discussion. Relations between Israel and Egypt seem to have remained relatively peaceful until the middle of the 7th century BCE, when Pharaoh Psammetichus I, 664 to 610 BCE, taking advantage of the crumbling Assyrian Empire, may have attempted to exert control over trade routes in southern Palestine. Then, in 609 BCE, the Judean king Josiah appears to have been assassinated by Pharaoh Necho, 610 to 595 BCE, ending high hopes for a Judean Renaissance that also accompanied the decline of Assyria. Now that we have looked at the broader ancient world, both geographically and historically, let's go back and fill in a bit of detail with regard to the geography of the Holy Land. it would be helpful for you to follow this discussion using map 3 at the back of the Jewish Study Bible. I will be highlighting 9 major regions: the coastal plain, the Shephelah, the Central Highlands, the Jezreel Valley, Galilee, the Jordan River or Rift Valley, the Dead Sea, Transjordan, and the Negev Desert. We'll begin with the coastal plain, grids W3 to W5 on map 3, which is somewhat wider in the south and gradually narrows until it is totally interrupted by the Carmel mountain range as it meets the Mediterranean Sea at the modern city of Haifa. Next is the Shephelah, or lowlands, grids X4 to W5 on map 3, the rolling hills that separate the coastal plain from the next region, the Central Highlands. As we'll see, the Shephelah becomes a major area of conflict between Israelites and Philistines. The Central Highland region, grids X4 to W6 on map 3, forms the core of early Israelite settlement. To the east is largely arid desert, as the land descends into the so-called Rift Valley, where the Jordan River flows, and we'll talk about that below. At the northern end of the Central Highlands is the Jezreel Valley, grid X on map 3, that runs from Haifa in the northeast to Beit Shan in the southwest. The Jezreel Valley separates the mountains of the Central Highlands from the mountainous region of Galilee, grids X2 to Y3 on map 3, that includes the well-known landmark, the Sea of Galilee, known in Hebrew as Kinneret, or the harp-shaped lake. The Jordan River has its source north of Kinneret and flows through what is known as the Rift Valley, grids Y2 to Y5 on map 3, which actually extends from southern Turkey to East Africa. The river empties into the Dead Sea, grids X5 to Y6 on map 3. To the east of the Jordan is Transjordan, grids Y3 to 4 on map 3, literally across the Jordan. This area currently forms part of the Kingdom of Jordan, but during the early phases of biblical history, it was occupied by tribes and groups associated with the nascent nation of Israel, and remained a disputed area throughout the history of biblical Israel. The entire southern part of the country is dominated by the arid Negev desert.